Blame shifting. Scapegoat. You don't want to end up like him, do you now? Years later, those words still echo through my mind. They act as some guardian from a crueler, supposed guardian, that ensures that I will never stumble, never flounder, and never fall victim to the injustices which this world has in store. I was shown what happens to those who are weak, those who fail to seize control and grasp the power for themselves, those that allow others to interfere in the administration of that power. The consequences of failure were paraded before me on an almost daily basis to allow me to witness the full horror of what it was to be substandard, below par, and just not good enough. The role of the scapegoat. I knew that this fate must not befall me, and that it became necessary for me to always ensure that I was higher than everybody else, no matter what it took or what the cost was. Naturally, being set apart, I had an advantage in terms of being above many to begin with. But there were always circumstances where that would be threatened, and action must be taken to preserve the gap between me and them. So long as there was somebody underneath me on that ladder as I climbed, then, as the saying goes, the devil would take the hindmost. Onwards and upwards, climbing higher and higher to escape the consequences of potential vulnerability, weakness, and failure. I was given a swift induction into learning how to stay ahead and to protect myself. There were two routes available to ensure that you stayed number one and the best. Strive to stay ahead of the opposition, and by the opposition, I learned that this meant everybody else, and then furthermore, bring the opposition down so that they become subsumed into the quagmire of failure. Strive upwards, keep them down, and thus the distance between me and them always remains sufficient so that control is maintained. For a long time, I believed that I solely learned this way to behave from the observance of the certain behaviours of another, my mother. However, as a consequence of interaction with the good doctors, I realised that much of this behaviour was already ingrained in me before I embraced it through awareness. It was part of who I was, that it was instinctive to a degree for me to scapegoat individuals. But then, as I was blessed with the awareness of what I was able also to witness scapegoating and recognise that this was a useful, no, necessary methodology to apply for myself. I was always taught to be the best, and therefore, to avoid the consequences of failure and the impact that it had on me, which I now understand would mean the feeling of vulnerability and weakness that came with the threat to control, that had to be headed off at the pass. And therefore, to achieve this, I would always work, strive, added to natural ability, to stay well ahead. But to belt and brace the situation, create scapegoats, shift the blame elsewhere, make somebody else at fault, cause them to be the ones that have the problems, and thus you open up clear blue sky between yourself and everybody else, and thus control is maintained. If your opponent is taller, chop him off at the knees. If he's better looking, fling acid in his face. If he is smarter, batter his brains out. If he's stronger, poison him into weakness. If he is wealthier, sap him of every penny and cent. If he lives in a pleasant place, pollute the neighbourhood. If he has a good job, get him sacked. Figuratively speaking, some of the time, of course, and that means to do all of those things, that it is necessary to play the scapegoat card, to make somebody else the scapegoat. Become proficient at pointing the finger elsewhere. Cultivate persuasiveness, so that the allocation of blame falls on the shoulders of another. Practice plausible deniability, so the mantle of fault never rests on my head. Never be the one at fault, ever. Those were my instructions, both internally and externally. The indoctrination continued. You are not to blame, HG. You are not guilty. You are not the problem. You didn't cause the problem either, except when it was suited to tell me that I had. Early confusing lessons, but I soon learned. Erase sorry from your vocabulary, as you do not feel it. Remove the idea of apologizing, as you have nothing to apologize for. Do not express anything which might be regarded as guilt, as that is an alien concept. The absence of those feelings which I recognize was given validation by these instructions. I never felt the need to be sorry, so it made sense to erase the concept of sorry from my vocabulary. I never felt like apologizing. I either saw that I had not done anything wrong, or the other individual was weak and brought it on themselves. Therefore, why should I apologize? And therefore it was right to me that I was told about removing the idea of apologizing. I didn't feel guilt. Again, what I did was correct and right, and therefore this express endorsement from my mother that I mustn't express anything that resembled guilt made perfect sense. Of course, the mid-range of our kind will believe, driven by their narcissism, that they are sorry, that they are apologetic, and they feel guilty. They do not, because they are narcissists, but they create the impression that they are, which is just another manipulation used against you. I not only don't feel sorry, I don't say as such. I don't express anything remotely close to the concept of guilt, because I feel none, and I don't see that there's anything to be served by admitting to being guilty when I am not. There is always somebody else who can be blamed. It doesn't take long for the repeated mantra of it never being my fault, allied with feeling that way anyway, to engender that sense of impregnability and a lack of accountability. I realise now what was happening to me was that there was an amalgam of two strands. I never felt to blame, and I was also being told that I wasn't to blame when it came to my behaviours with everybody else, other than this individual, my mother. And therefore, the lack of a feeling of accountability, the absence of conscience, the absence of guilt, was approved of, was reinforced. I never did query, is there something wrong with me? I knew that I was different. I knew that I was set apart from discussions that I'd had with my siblings and with friends when I was young. And now I received that validation. The absence of that feelings was entirely right and proper. That is the way that it was. That was the way that it had to be. And as part of this, the blame shifting by creating scapegoats was given validation. The inherent sense that that was appropriate to do, that there was nothing wrong with behaving that way, received approval. Since it is the fault of everyone else, it is impeccable logic, is it not, that it can never be my fault? It therefore follows that it is never my fault, then such a fault-free individual is truly superior and stands above all others. To facilitate this, therefore, it becomes necessary to identify a scapegoat, or more accurately, scapegoats. The role of scapegoat slots seamlessly into the thinking of the narcissist. Fault is an intangible concept, but it exists. Someone is always to blame. I felt that, and then I was taught that from a very early age. People often say things do not just happen, they happen for a reason. And the reason that she was always crying, that he was always failing, that they were socially ostracised, that she could not pass her exam, that he never scored a goal, that they never went on holiday, that he couldn't hold down a job, that she was a single mother, that he had a drink problem, that she was ugly, that he lived in a poor area, that she was never invited out, that he died alone, that she was beaten, that he was arrested, that she was raped, that he was murdered, was because they were all to blame. They were scapegoats. Make others the scapegoat, and immunity from fault and blame follows, and thus one can move without hindrance, barrier, or boundary. Make him or her a scapegoat, because if you don't get in first, they will do it to you. Make sure you blame them before they can turn that accusing eye in your direction. Stay 1, no, stay 10 steps ahead. They deserve to be blamed. If they had any value, they wouldn't be stigmatized in such a fashion. It is their own fault. I learnt that they may come with smiles, but the blade of blame is held behind their back, ready to strike. So plunge your dagger or fault deep into them. So plunge your dagger of fault deep into them first. Don't be taken in by the false proclamations of love and compassion. They are but veils to place across my eyes, so a crown of accountability can then be thrust on my head when I'm distracted. That must be resisted. That threatens my control. Soon the lessons that I learned began to automatically teach me. Not feeling enough attention at a party? Then that is because the guests are ignorant and impolite. It's their fault. Tell one that this is a case and see how the attention shifts. Serve slowly at the bar. The barman is obviously incompetent and should be reminded of this fact. See, he's responded now. Report not completed on time? Find a junior colleague and point out how he has failed to provide the necessary information. Criticise for not earning enough? Blame the bosses for running the company into the ground and failing to reward a high achiever. Feeling restless and unloved? Lash out at her so she seeks to make amends. Stuck in a traffic jam? Blame the Department of Transport for the ill-thought-out roadworks. Make the scapegoats, shift the blame, maintain the control. Struggling to sleep? Well, it must be those damn neighbours and their late-night music. Go and give them a piece of your mind and see how much better you feel when you point out that they are at fault. But then, what if it is not those things, and it is because I am not interested enough to talk to, or not attractive enough to catch the server's eye, or not good enough at my job, or not hitting the targets because I cannot apply the required effort, or because I don't show her any affection any longer, or because I set off late from the house, or because I fell asleep this afternoon? Never. Those are the perfidious accusations of those seeking not to accept the blame that is rightfully theirs. This is what you want us to think. This is your attempt to assert control over you. This is how you get inside our heads and try to make us think that we are weak when we are not. Remember, I was told, they will try to scapegoat you. They are envious of your success and they want you to be the failure. They see you set apart, they want to bring you down, and therefore you will be the subject of their blaming. They want you to take the rap, take the hit and become the patsy. You are right, they are not. Remember that. The diktat still resonates even now, reminding and emphasizing that is not your role. You are better than all of them. You will rise above them, and to do that you must work hard at everything and ensure that they are the ones who are to blame, because they are. They are the ones who are trying to stop you achieving and claiming what is rightfully yours. Do not let them stand in your way. They are the traitors, the insidious foes, the treacherous betrayers who spout sedition and practice disloyalty. Let them know what they are. Scapegoat them. Pin the blame on them. This mindset carries into everything that we narcissists do. Lesser and mid-range, of course, it is instinctive. That mentality that they are the victim and it is always the fault of somebody else. With the greater and the ultra, we are set apart. It cannot be our fault because we are superior. We find scapegoats in every aspect of our lives. The put-upon sibling, the browbeaten colleague, the lambasted neighbour, the oddball in the local superstore, the subjugated underling, the butt of the social circle, and most of all you, the intimate partner who becomes the ultimate scapegoat. It is you that becomes the receptacle for our domineering, hectoring, nagging, bullying, blaming, intimidating, coercing, blaming, accusing, menacing, terrorizing, bludgeoning, and oppressive persecutions that are all predicated on our absolute belief that we are right and you are wrong. You burnt dinner. You made the white shirt turn pink. You forgot to get that present that we wanted. You failed to satisfy our sexual appetite. You made us be unfaithful. You made us break that mirror. You made us slap you. You made us ill. You made our team lose. You cost us that promotion. You woke us too early. You woke us too late. You let us fall asleep. You kept us awake. You didn't do it. You did it again. This conditioning ensured that the only way to stay ahead, to win and to succeed, was not only to strive, but then to find somebody else to blame. And that doesn't change because we know you are just waiting to try to blame us. Well, we know your game. We have you in our eyes, and it is you who is to blame, not us. The only way to prevent the hell of someone trying to make us the scapegoat is to make you the scapegoat instead. And so I do as I do, I say as I say, and I am what I am, so that I don't end up like him, like her, like them, like you. Can you really blame me for doing that?